It is now 10 o'clock, so welcome everyone. Welcome to the Combined Fire Authority. Can I first of all apologise why we're here? We were supposed to meet at Fire HQ and have a bit of a tour with Callum, but unfortunately the Director of Public Health advised us to be more spread out. And if you've got a Director of Public Health, we best take his advice. So we are here today and I'm sorry for that. And as soon as we can, we will go back down to Fire HQ. It's good for us, good for morale for the officers who work for the authority. So let's hope we can get back there in February. Normal stuff, this is recorded, as Anna's just told you, on YouTube. The link's available on the CFA website. Some officers who are presenting reports will be joining the meeting virtually. We've got others in the room with us today, so you all know Lauren, the monitoring officer, you know Callum, and we've got Colin here today from the City Council. He's doing the Treasurer's job. We're also online. We're going to have Gavin Barker and Leah Parsons from Mazars, our external auditors, who have been excellent. And we've got Matthew Wallace, the Director of Estates and Building Services at the City Council, accompanied by Sam Law from the same department. Can all members and officers remember to use your microphones, you know, normal on and off stuff, so because the camera tends to follow if it's left on. Apologies for absence. We did have Brian Lovegrove sending his apologies, but we now have a real Brian Lovegrove, so he's not substituted. So welcome, Brian. Declarations of interests. I'm assuming all members will declare an interest in agenda item 16, which is just the normal review of members' allowances. So I'll just, you'll record that, won't you, Lauren? Thank you. Has anybody else got any other members' declarations? No, we haven't, Lauren. There's no urgent items. I've got Chairman's announcements, which were circulated separately. Worth mentioning that we've got the inspectors coming in between January and February, and full inspection. We'll report back when we've done it. On performance, really good news. Callum and his team, Paul and the officers down there have done an excellent job to move us up from a lower quartile to a higher quartile, especially bearing in mind, as is usual in Leicestershire, we're a poorly funded fire authority, a relatively small fire authority, and I think it's a credit to you, Callum and Paul, that you've achieved what you've achieved. On national awards, we've got 3 staff shortlisted for national awards in the categories which are down below, which again is really good, and we should offer our congratulations to those 3, please, Callum. Let's hope they win. On public participation, we've had no questions received, so I move straight away to the minutes of the meeting from the 22nd of February. These are on 5 to 12 if you pack, and I'll move the meetings be taken, read and confirmed and signed. Elaine?
Yes, I can confirm that, Chair.
All happy? Thank you very much. Next is our Corporate Governance Committee meeting, 14th of July. Ken?
Yes, happy to propose acceptance of those minutes, all issued, Chairman.
Patty, will you second?
Yes.
All in favour? Excellent, thank you. Statement of accounts. This is on page 21 to 24 of the agenda pack and pages 5 to 164 of the supplementary agenda pack. As I said earlier, we've got Colin here, you all know Colin, and Gavin Barker, who's, I think he's a partner at Mazars, who's our external auditors. They will present the report, and then we'll take a few questions. Colin, you got anything to say?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll briefly introduce this then. I think Gavin will come in and present his auditor's report, and then I can add anything else that's necessary after that. So just to reiterate to the CFA that the purpose of this report is to seek approval to the annual statement of accounts and annual governance statement for the 2021 financial year that finished at the end of March, and for the external auditor who we have with us to provide an update detailing their work and recommendations. Just to draw the CFA's attention to that there was a holding report with the original agenda for the meeting, and then a supplementary report following consideration following the finalisation of the work by the external auditor. So please refer to the supplementary report, not the original one. And I think at this point it's customary to invite the external auditor to speak.
Yeah, well, good morning, Gavin. Good morning, Leah. Do either of you want to say anything? We think you've been good auditors, but anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. We need to briefly present our audit completion report. Leah's here as the new audit manager on your audit. This is our third year. You may recall we had some difficulties in the first year, but they've all been overcome. The arrangements that the Fire Authority now has in place are sort of really good arrangements for producing the financial statements and producing them to a high quality. The first thing I wanted to say was just to apologise for the delays this year. The statutory timetable for the finalisation of the audit was the end of September. That was brought forward by 2 months from the extended period that was allowed last year because of the pandemic, but we've to experience difficulties due to the ongoing effects of the pandemic, really, and also recruitment and retention problems. It's a bit of an issue in the whole audit sector at the moment, and we informed officers at quite an early stage that we wouldn't be able to meet the end of September timetable. So we can't compromise on audit quality. We have to do things to the same sort of high quality standards. So the only thing we can do is report at a later date, and that's why we're coming to you today to present our report. What I'd really like to emphasise is that your officers did their bit. They met all the statutory deadlines for the production of the financial statements and for the publication of the draft financial statements by the end of July. And more than that, when we undertook our audit, we found the quality of the financial statements is good, and the working papers, which are so important, and the supporting evidence which underpins the financial statement was also of good quality. And officers were also very responsive to our queries. They worked really closely with us in a constructive way. And we accept that the delays sort of didn't help officers because, you know, officers have a lot of other jobs to do as well as deal with the audit, and we appreciate the approach that they've adopted. And I'd like to personally thank Colin Sharp from the council and Manjora Bisler and his team within Fire for the support that they've provided this year. So the position we're at today is we're subject to your approval of the financial statements. We're in a position where we can issue our unqualified opinion on the financial statements. We've completed all of our work now in relation to the financial statements. We mentioned in the report that we would issue a follow-up letter if necessary. We don't think one is necessary because nothing has arisen subsequent to the production of the audit completion report that needs to be reported to you. There are no additional issues, so we won't be producing a follow-up letter. There is a couple of things that are different to previous years, and that is we aren't able to report at this point on value for money arrangements because of the difficulties in the sector. National Audit Office, who provides the guidance to us around value for money, and it was a new approach this year, allowed an extension in the timetable for the reporting of that work. So the extension that they allowed was that we need to report on value for money within 3 months of reporting on the opinion. So we're reporting on the opinion today, so we have up to 3 months to then report to you on value for money. We don't want to take that full period. We want to report quicker than that, but we do again want to take the time to do it properly because it is a new approach. There's no longer an unqualified or qualified conclusion on your value for money arrangements. There is a narrative commentary, and we have to report any exceptions if we identify any significant weaknesses, and we have to make recommendations if we identify any significant weaknesses. We have actually done a lot of the work in relation to value for money, and I just inform members at this stage that we haven't identified any risks of significant weaknesses, and we haven't identified any significant weaknesses at this stage. And to be honest, we don't expect to. So we expect to issue a report that provides a narrative commentary on your arrangements, but doesn't highlight any sort of particular problems with your arrangements. The other thing that we're not in a position to report on, which we normally are at this point, is whole of government accounts. This is the submission which the authority has to make, providing its financial numbers to fit into the national government accounts. We haven't got our guidance on what we have to do yet, and in fact, The authority hasn't got its guidance on what it needs to submit yet either, because you're waiting for that guidance from Treasury. I think it comes from Treasury, and it was promised in December at the earliest. So there'll be a delay as a result of that as well. So that means that we aren't able to issue our certificate today, which would formally close the audit. We can't issue the certificate until everything is finished. So we'll issue that certificate at a later date, but we will issue the opinion on the financial statements and a report that just highlights that whole of government accounts and value for money are to follow. That's actually included in your in the report. It's at Appendix 2. It's you might struggle to believe this, but it's the plain English version of the audit report. But the main thing to take from that audit report is that it is a clear, unqualified opinion on your financial statements. I won't go into very much detail on the sort of content of the detailed work on the financial statements. We do identify significant risks. They're risks not in the sense that we have some particular suspicion about your arrangements. They're risks because they're significant parts of your accounts, and the audit sort of focuses on those as a consequence. We identified 3: management override of controls, the valuation of property, plant and equipment, and the pensions liability. And we have no significant findings to report to you on any of those things, other than on pensions. There was an unadjusted misstatement, which is included in the misstatements table in the report. It was below materiality, nothing to do with your arrangements, but it was to do with the figures that are provided by the actuary in relation to the valuation of your share of pension fund assets. There was a difference between what the actuary estimated and the actual performance of asset values at the year end. There was a difference. It was £700,000 or thereabouts. It isn't material to the statements. Officers have chosen not to amend for it for lots of sensible reasons, including the fact that the changes would sort of reach throughout the accounts and be quite complicated to make. And as it isn't material, it isn't necessary to do so anyways. So that those are the only things I wanted to draw to your attention on the content of the opinion audit. We do request from you a letter of representation. That's one of the things that you're going to approve. The audit report's there for you to see, and as I say, it's an unqualified one. And the final thing I would want to mention is our independence. Our independence is precious to us. We have a good working relationship, as I've sort of mentioned, with your officers, but it's sort of a professional relationship. We work, we carry out our audit in what we call a professionally skeptical way. We challenge the disclosures in the financial statements. We carry out lots of detailed work in relation to them. We do that without fear or favour, and we haven't identified any issues, any conflicts, anything that would challenge the fact that we are anything but objective and independent. And that's the final thing I wanted to say in terms of presenting our report. I'm quite happy to take any questions or listen to any comments that members might have. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Your comments obviously are recorded and noted in the minutes. Colin, did you want to add anything, Colin? And also thank you for your good work. I think it was a good decision of this authority to use the City Council's finances. So obviously we get a good service, and of course you save us money. Colin.
Okay, thank you very much. No, I've nothing to add. The recommendations that are set out in the report, Gavin has covered a number of points that I would have picked up had he not. I would just also highlight to add my thanks to Manny and the finance team for getting us to this position with a clean set of accounts in a timely fashion that have had a good audit.
Yep, as an accountant, it's your day in the sun today, isn't it? So we've got some recommendations. Can I I'm not going to read them all out because they're too long. Can I formally move them? It's A, B and C with some little numbers underneath B. And also note under C that we're approving the Treasurer to make some minor amendments if necessary. They're only minor, but says bringing everything back here. If I move them, will you second it, Elaine?
Yes, seconded, Chair.
Okay, before we vote, any questions to any of the people that are here? No, can we have a formal show of hands in favour of the accounts? Thank you. They're approved unanimously, Gavin, and hopefully we'll see you next year. And you as well, Leah.
Thank you, Chair. We'll leave now. Thank you. Bye.
Right, let's move on to 9 then, which is day crewing plus, pages 25 to 30 of your agenda. It's more by way of an update, and we've got Callum to do it. And also, Callum, thanks. Sorry, I forgot to thank you as well. Thanks for input into the accounts. And if you've got anything to add, you can mention it now. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rushton. All I would do is express my thanks to Colin Sharp and Manjura Bisla. They put a lot of effort in to get us into this position, and it's very much appreciated. Moving on to agenda item 9, an update on the day crewing plus duty system. The paper provides a bit of a brief update regarding the DCP or Day Crew Plus system following the workshop we held with members on the 22nd of September this year. Since then, officers have undertaken a number of actions, and this is described in paragraphs 12 to 19 on page 27 of your bundle. I'd estimate that officers have had face-to-face contact with somewhere between 70 and 90 staff regarding the matter. And to date, the feedback we've received is a little disappointing, if I'm honest. It's a very significant area for the service. So because of that, talking with my senior team, we've decided to re-energise the campaign around engagement, give them another month or two to kind of really suggest any improvements or different systems we could possibly explore. And I'll bring a further update paper back to the CFA in February, hopefully detailing the next steps. Other than that, I don't think it's particularly worth dwelling on the paper too much more, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Yes, we're doing as well as we can with it because it's a popular service that we offer to officers of the authority. Any questions for Callum? Yes, Betty.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much, Colin, for all the work that is done on that, because it's very difficult when you don't get much response back when you consult. It's very disheartening is the way I would use it. And I am pleased to see it's coming back to us. And what I would want to know, what other mechanisms can we put into place to ensure that we get a better response rate, especially from firefighters? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. I think there's a few actions for us to undertake. There is a truth that I should probably speak, that it may be that the shift working group formed between the Fire Brigades Union, senior managers and Fire Officers Association have explored all the options, and there's nothing else out there. But I do think it's worth the due diligence to really kind of pull on them strings to make sure. I've got a vlog going out in the service later today, again, to try and re-energise some engagement. Paul Weston's going to follow that up briefly before Christmas. I'll also do another, I think there's another 2 or 3 chat with the chief events where we hold face-to-face engagement, but also ask people to dial in if they can't come. Yeah, I think it's a difficult subject, and it's a frustrating subject for many. We'll try to do everything we can do with it. It's difficult to get engagement sometimes, and there may well be some resentment around this because it's changing a shift system that a lot of people really like, and it arguably is changing it to a less favourable pattern. So there will be some resentment to engage, but we'll work as hard as we can do to overcome that. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's not actually our fault. You know, our officers were happy with it. It's just the result of that blooming court case. So we've got recommendations here on A and B, which I'll formally move. And I know Paul does a lot of work on it, doesn't he, Callum? So thanks for your work you're doing. And if we can reach a deal with them that's legal, I think we'll do well. Elaine, can you second?
Yes, seconded, Chair.
Okay, all in favour of the recommendations A and B? Thank you. Another one here, which is causing us grief, which is the Firefighters Pension Scheme Age Discrimination Remedy Update. This is 31 to 50. It's the immediate detriment thing which is causing some grief. So I'm going to not talk about it, Colin, because you understand it. You can tell us.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, and thank you for your expression of confidence that I understand this. I understand it. I understand as a relatively new pension scheme manager coming into this. I understand it to a point, but I do very much rely on the experts to advise me as well. Okay, so I will do a general introduction, and then I will depart from the report as written and provide the CFA with the latest update. So just as a reminder, the CFO will recall that firefighter pensions are very significant. They're complex. The future liabilities are a significant factor in your accounts. Managing and processing them takes a lot of staff time, and obviously they're of keen personal interest to uniformed staff. The CFA, i.e. yourselves, are the formal pension scheme manager, with the responsibilities delegated to myself. And the local pension board, which meets after this meeting, assists the CFA to secure compliance with regulations, ensure proper governance, administration, etc. As members will be aware, and as the chair intimated, age discrimination remedy is very significant to firefighters. It has an immediate impact for those retiring or planning to retire between now and March 2022, and it also affects some of those who have retired since April 2015. The remedy continues to be the subject of very high-level national legal proceedings. It is very complex. It interlinks with the tax system in many ways, and it's taken a lot of staff time to direct and process, and is very high profile. And you'll recall that the CFA and local pension board have previously approved immediate actions to be taken by the chief fire officer. Developments, however, continue to be fast moving, and the position and recommendations in the report before you are now materially outdated, despite having been drafted only a matter of days before the agenda pack was issued. So the report as written provides a recap on the background, which is still current. It goes on to describe the memorandum of understanding and the framework that was negotiated by the LGA and the FBU, setting out the principal advantages, concerns and risks. The report as presented concludes that on balance, the risk of not adopting a memorandum of understanding outweighs the risk of adopting it. So therefore, as presented, the report recommended adoption of the memorandum of understanding and approval of the priority order for addressing individual cases, recognising the likely practical difficulties of achieving the 90-day target for all of them. Also notes that we have in effect been processing category 1 cases for some time, these being the personnel still working for the service but who are approaching retirement before the end of March. And we also ceased any further tapering into the 2015 scheme last summer. So that means that members that had some protection to stay in the 92 or the 06 scheme for a period before transferring to the 2015 scheme, we are leaving them in the 92 or 2006 scheme to prevent any further problems arising. So we have done everything that we can, I think, as a fire authority, and bringing the memorandum of understanding to you today for approval was really the next big step. However, this is where I now depart from the report. So earlier this week, Chief Fire and Rescue Officers were informed via the LGA that the Home Office has very suddenly withdrawn its existing informal non-statutory guidance in relation to processing certain kinds of immediate detriment cases ahead of intended legislation. We were not expecting this. I read the email 2 or 3 times when Callum sent it through, and then obviously there was a lot of toing and froing on the fire finance and pensions community. So the message goes on to say that although the decision remains for scheme managers, i.e. the CFA and myself, to make, the government does not advise schemes to process any immediate detriment cases before legislation is in place, given the risk and the uncertainty. So that is clearly a significant change from the previous position, which was using the negotiated frameworks to proceed. The legislation is the Public Service Pensions and Judicial Offices Bill, which is currently progressing through Parliament, and the third reading is scheduled for the 6th of December, so in the coming days. So also in that notification a couple of days ago, the Home Office also advised that also said that because the government now advises that immediate detriment cases shouldn't be processed in advance of this legislation coming into force, the Home Office will not be in a position to provide any additional funding for costs paid outside of the pensions account. So this increases the risk to the fire authority of continuing to process any immediate detriment cases, because the government have now made it fairly clear that they probably won't meet the cost of those, and they certainly won't meet the cost of any tax implications on the fire authority or individual members that the fire authority might reimburse. They would need to be funded locally by each fire and rescue authority. So although we have been concerned about government funding of all of this, that actually really crystallises it. The Home Office have been clear they will not fund anything now, because government advice is not to proceed with any further immediate detriment cases. And there was a note from Her Majesty's Treasury confirming the decision, and clearly this is being driven by the Treasury, not by the Home Office. The LGA commented they appreciate this may be a cause of concern. I think that's an understatement, to authorities that have adopted the Memorandum of Understanding or are considering whether to adopt it, as was the recommendation before yourselves this morning. And the LGA is considering these aspects and will write to fire and rescue authorities and scheme managers as soon as possible. I think just without prolonging this too much, to sort of comment on the Treasury note, it's clear that national officials at Treasury have really widened their risk aversion in this. There has always been a risk. And I think when the Home Office issued the guidance in June that we've been working on, the risks around tax in particular were acknowledged. And they knew that some individual complex scenarios could not be resolved before legislation. But it seems that the Treasury have now concluded that whilst drafting the legislation I referred to, that new bill, the gaps and uncertainties are considerably greater than was previously thought. And they're also of the view that the Equality Act provisions do not translate neatly across the tax provisions in the way that may have been previously thought. So, for example, and again, I can go into more detail with the pension board if required, but if authorities were to offset the employer and employee pension contributions that have been made under the 2015 scheme against arrears that would accrue under the 92 scheme, if members decide to switch to the 92 scheme, it now looks like we can't simply take the tax relief from one scheme to another. They would be treated separately, potentially with a large tax bill for the authority and for the retired firefighters concerned. So, as I said, the Treasury's view is therefore that immediate detriment cases, including those coming up to retirement before the end of March, which we have been processing, cannot now be processed before legislation is in place, without placing considerable risk, uncertainty and administrative burdens for individuals, schemes and employers. I think the Treasury are making it clear they're not querying the principle here. They are not querying the fact that the decision about equality, age discrimination and immediate detriment has been made, but what they are clearly doing is issuing very strong advice that fire and rescue authorities should not continue to process retirements, giving members the choice between the 2015 or their legacy scheme before the end of March, and we should not proceed to process those that have retired since 2015 under the 2015 scheme, but would have been better off under their 1992 or 2006 scheme, as we were proposing to you today. So I have to say that whilst this is clearly very concerning, I think as sort of the scheme manager, I cannot recommend that the CFA goes against government advice and places both itself and individuals at the risk of unexpected tax and other charges. And therefore, revised recommendations are being put to the meeting, essentially that in the light of the communications received earlier in the week, that the CFA pauses action to address immediate detriments at this time, and that once the national sector response to this latest development becomes clearer, and we've reviewed that we present a report back to the CFA at the earliest opportunity. I do have to say this position clearly places the CFA at risk of legal proceedings by affected personnel, potentially supported by the FBU. One of the principal advantages of the Memorandum of Understanding that was before you today was A, it set out a way forward, and B, the FBU had undertaken not to support any affected members to take legal proceedings at authorities that had adopted the MOU and were working within the spirit of it. So I imagine the FBU nationally will be considering its response to this latest development, as indeed are fire and rescue authorities as the employers and indeed scheme managers. Just to say that following this meeting, the local pension board is receiving a similar report, slightly more detailed, and obviously we'll hear of the CFA's decision, and I'm sure we'll wish to debate that and make comments. I will, with the pension board, go into more detail on the number of affected members, but just in summary, we've already processed 6 immediate detriment retirements of those members that have retired in recent months. We've got a handful coming through that we know of to the end of March, and we've been looking at how many members have retired since 2015 that might be better off in their legacy scheme, and we think it's around 20. We are still working through the list, but to give you just an idea of numbers that are affected here. So it's not an update I particularly wish to have to bring to this CFA, but I guess on the positive side, at least that Treasury advice arrived before the meeting rather than after it. And at that point, I'll conclude and happy to take any questions.
You certainly seem to understand it to me, Colin. I mean, there were so many dates and numbers in there as it went over my perm. I mean, it's a shame that the memorandum of understanding is got to be set aside, but I'm content that we've done all we can as the fire authority to drive it forward. But when you get the Home Office and Treasury saying you've got to pause it, I don't think we've got any alternative other than to go with the recommendations as suggested. I'll formally move them. Elaine, are you okay to second them?
I am okay to second them, Chair, because our hands are tied.
It's a shame because we were doing okay, but there you go. Any questions for Colin? Let's hope not, because I found his presentation very deep.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Chair.
go ahead.
Just very quickly, you mentioned some numbers, but what remedial action or what interim arrangements are being made with those impacted in terms of advice and guidance? Thank you.
That is something. Thank you. That is something we'll need to consider. We were planning communications following the CFA today with the affected members, well, with members generally, but particularly the affected members, to say that the CFA had adopted the memorandum of understanding, and therefore we would start processing the category 2 cases, i.e. those that had retired since 2015 but would have been better under their old scheme. Clearly, we are going to need to revise that communications now and inform members generally, but particularly those affected ones that were not able, regrettably, to adopt the MOU. And I'm sure the FBU will be having communications through their channels as well. But yeah, that's something we'll need to do. But given the speed at which this has arisen, we haven't yet planned it. We do have a regional meeting this afternoon, Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, where again, and that's with the regional pensions experts as well on the call. So I'm sure we'll try and plan something similar across the 3 authorities that work together.
Yeah, I think it's important to tell the FBU and the members it's not what we wanted to do, it's what we're compelled to do, and hopefully we won't give rise to legal challenge because it's not our fault, because we've got a good relationship with the workers and a good relationship with the FBU. Okay, no other questions. Can I have a show of hands in favour of the recommendations A and B? Thank you. That's everyone, Colin. National Scheme for Auditor Appointments, pretty standard sort of stuff. This is 51 to 54 and some extra stuff, 165 to 178. It's you, Colin, isn't it?
Yes,
I missed one out. I'm on 11. Is that right? Yes, Colin.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll give a.
We don't want a lot of chat on it, Colin, because it's pretty standard. And us people here at County Council did exactly the same yesterday. So I'll just move it. Are you okay to second it, Elaine?
Yeah,
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you short.
No, that's absolutely fine.
All in favour? Thank you. Next is service delivery update 55 to 60. And we've got Paul with us, who, as you know, is now our acting chief fire officer. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Members will have seen the paper. All I could really highlight is the fantastic achievement from last year. We've managed to take the service from the bottom quartile right up to the top quartile, and that's the fantastic efforts of our staff in the prevention and protection arena. again, looking at this year's figures comparatively, it looks like we're going to actually better last year's figures. So hopefully we'll be maintaining our position in the top quartile. That's certainly one of the things that I've tried to reiterate to the staff that we want to achieve. You'll see that we've also introduced feedback. So we're actually asking the community now, has the visit actually affected you? How has it impacted you? How do you feel after the home fire safety check? And you will see in paragraph 8 that 94% of the community feel safer, and actually 81% of staff will actually change their current habits, which is fantastic. It means that we're actually delivering the right message to the community. Protection, fire protection, it's the fire safety audits. Again, we've upped the target for this year, and it's pleasing to say that we are on target to achieve an increased number of fire safety audits. We do have a number of prosecutions that we're looking to take out, and that's where owners aren't complying with the regulations, they're not complying with the law. We have tried everything possible, feasibly possible, to work with them to achieve compliance. But again, they're not taking our advice, so we're taking that to the next steps. In response, you will see that the service have attended more incidents than in the second quarter than they did comparative to the previous year. And that's partly due to COVID restrictions. We're seeing a lot more traffic on the road and an increase in road traffic collisions. And we're doing all we can to try and reiterate the road safety message. Likewise, in paragraph 15, you'll see that we are actually attending a lot more fatalities than previous years. And that's because we're actually going to support our partners in EMAS a lot more in gaining entry. That obviously has an impact on our staff, and it's really important now that we've actually introduced the TRIM, the Trauma Incident Management process that would debrief our staff so we don't adversely affect their mental health when dealing with such incidents. I'm quite happy, Chair, to take any questions that members may have.
Yep, you've done well. I called you assistant, but yeah, I called you acting, your actual assistant. Sorry, Paul. No, I think you've done really well. And I think the idea of the trauma incident management is very good, because I get the notifications where we've had to break in, and some of the things that they experience when they have to break in are pretty awful. Questions? Let me start off with Betty.
It's to some extent, it's not so much a question, but it's more or less, I think we should commend the increase in community safety and fire protection, the activities carried out by officers, including, as you mentioned, the alarms installed, etc., during a COVID period, where it's often very difficult to go into homes during COVID. I think we should commend the work, the increase in the work done. The other part, there is a question to this one. Could you give us an update on the absences due to the need to self-isolate because of COVID? Has it had a big impact on the authority? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Just before I answer your question, I'll take a little bit of a privilege. Assistant Chief Officer Weston kind of breezed over the figures a little bit and just quite how dramatic the change is on the national standpoint. And I thank both Assistant Chief Officers, Paul and Carl Bowden, incredible amount of work to motivate and to stimulate the organisation. And on the crude figures, we've moved up into the top quartile just on the numbers delivered. But when you look at the size of organisations, actually we're the fourth most effective in the country. And that's really impressive. We've come from quite a poor position to an outstanding position. And I thank each and every one of the organisation for doing that. In answer to your question, reference COVID absences, we reviewed them actually on Wednesday. The number of COVID absences aren't significant at the moment. We have had a few signs that it's increasing, and certainly in our appliance and equipment department, we had a number of cases. What we are seeing at the moment, and we'll come on to talk about Omicron on one of the other agenda items, we are seeing a number of non-vaccinated people in the workforce now having to self-isolate on a couple of occasions. So we're monitoring that very closely. Our sickness rates for COVID are relatively low at the moment and have been for a number of months. But certainly with the advent of Omicron, we've now started to meet again regularly, involving the Fire Brigade Union and ourselves, just to make sure we're prepared and ready to respond as and when guidance changes, or indeed we have any local circumstances. So we're very much on it, but at the moment it's quite stable, he says, touching wood.
Good. Well, we've got some recommendations. So I'll move that the final update provided on the key service delivery matters for the second quarter of 2021, July to September. And rather than be noted, I think they should be welcomed, and congratulations be sent to all officers who've achieved this rather than just noting it, which is an amendment from your first what's printed. And then you've got A, B and C, which I think we can leave in. So, but Elaine, are you happy to alter to be welcomed and offer congratulations to all who achieved it?
Yes, Chair. I would offer my congratulations too, and seconded. Thank you.
Okay, show of hands in favour. Thank you, Paul and Carl, and obviously you, Callum, as the boss. Well, this next one's about COVID. It was supposed to be how we handled COVID, but now is rehandling COVID because we've got the Omicron variant. So, Callum, let us know.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise for the timing of this. When we wrote it, the situation seemed very stable, and subsequently the new variant's been detected. But actually, the idea of this paper was to go back and, as a learning organisation, review and critically analyse what we did over the first sort of year, 18 months of the COVID pandemic, and how we responded and how we continue to support our community. The paper's very in-depth, and it shows a number of areas where we've done well or excelled, but equally there's a number of areas where we feel we could do better ourselves. So we've reviewed that and wanted to kind of present that to members in the paper. I think it's also worth highlighting that certainly in the first 9 months of COVID, we were externally audited by Her Majesty's Inspectorate for Constabularies and Fire, which also came back as incredibly positive, dare I even say, an excellent response from Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service to the communities of LLR. And brushing on Councillor Newton's comments previously, we're back on alert now to keep an active view on what's going on throughout the pandemic and how that's represented in our communities. And obviously the change in venue today is showing that the local analysis continues, and we'll look to show look to make sure we continue to provide that excellent service for the community that we will do. Happy to take any questions.
I think it was a good report because you identify where you've done well, but equally important, you identify where you didn't do quite so well. So Betty, you're first.
Thank you very much. There's really some very positive feedback here, and thank you very much for everything. But I just wanted to ask, I mean, I'm a great believer in bringing everybody in and bringing everybody on board. Is it correct to say that the unions weren't consulted or part of this exercise?
No, I wouldn't say that's fair. Ben B, who's done the exercise and looked at it, has talked with internal and external stakeholders throughout. The union have been part of all the meetings throughout COVID, so have been consulted and engaged throughout all the decisions we've made through COVID. Did they physically contribute to the report? I don't have that information to hand, Councillor Newton, but I would imagine they have been invited to play part of the debrief, and certainly their members have been involved in the debrief process itself. I can't speak about the officials because I don't know that. I'm sorry.
Okay, we've got some recommendations that we note the feedback is as printed. I'll move it. Elaine?
Seconded, Chair.
All in favour? Thank you.
Chair, for interrupting. Because of all the work that's been done here through COVID and etc., and working with partnership, can we, to some extent, I think I've mentioned earlier, send out a positive message to all our staff?
You can do that, can't you, Callum? Okay, we'll do that, Betty. Okay, so we've got development of the canteen area next, 75 to 90. As you know, we were going to go and have a look at it, but we can't. So Callum's got us a video. I promise you it's not long. So Callum.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I thank members for their patience on this matter, as it's been going on for a little while now. And I'm sure we'll appreciate that COVID-19's kind of impacted our ability to undertake this type of work. And also it's kind of changed the market and the environment we're operating in with regards to renting space or converting space to be rented. As the Chair's already mentioned, we were supposed to be at Fire Service headquarters today. Unfortunately, we've not been able to do that. So for those members who haven't been able to visit the site, I'm going to try and now play a video through the Teams meeting. As the Chair says, it is only a short video, but bear with me. That's not the button. Hang on.
If you can't get it to work, Callum, we can always go in February, hopefully.
Yes, Chair, like all best laid plans, it seems that the technology's let me down a little bit.
A lot of us have been round it. Some of us have never been round it. We know where it is. It's a historic problem that we've got, and I think the recommendations are pretty fine because whatever happens, we're talking 6 months. We'll start anyway. So shall I just move the recommendations, Elaine, and we'll attempt to go and have another look for those of us who've never been in February.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair.
Okay, all in favour? Thank you. If COVID does subside, if you want to go, Callum will just direct, you don't have to wait to all go some huge team. So new people who want to go to fire headquarters, contact Callum and he can arrange it. Okay, let's go to review and revision of the Constitution. I don't think we need you to speak to this. It's one of those other boring things that's always on agendas if you serve on a council. I'll move the recommendations. Elaine?
Seconded, Chair.
All happy? Thank you. Sorry to cut you short, Lauren, but I bet you're happy. The final report on the public part of the agenda is the review of members' allowances. It is what it is. I'm a great believer in if you have an independent remuneration panel, you take their recommendations, and I will formally move the recommendations as outlined on the paper. Elaine?
Seconded, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Urgent items, there are none. Date of next meeting. Everyone, next meeting will be held on the 9th of February. Hopefully we'll have another go, see if we can have it at Callum's place. If not, unfortunately, you'll have to come back here. But we are where we are with that. So now I've got to move exclusion of the press and public, which I do have to read. I now move that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following items of business on the grounds that involves the likely disclosure of exempt information. 1, training facility, service leadership and development centre project update as defined in paragraph 3, and that in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I will formally move that. Are you okay with that, Elaine?
Seconded, Chair.
And then if we go on, we've also got another, oh no, that's the only one. So it's just how my